Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're wrestling with a question that I think keeps every startup founder, every NGO director, basically any challenger awake at night.
Yeah, it's a big one.
How do you secure a competitive advantage when your biggest rival has these overwhelming resources? I mean, when they can just outspend you into oblivion.
It's the ultimate strategic paradox, isn't it? Because everyone talks about that Silicon Valley mandate, the Y Combinator pillar.
Make something people want.
Exactly, make something people want. But, that's really only half the battle. What happens when you do that, when you succeed, and some corporate behemoth just decides to weaponize its balance sheet and crush your innovation?
Right. So our deep dive today, and we're pulling heavily from strategists like David J. Abbott and Roger Martin here, is really about proving that a competitive advantage isn't always something you buy.
No, it's something you notice, something you can leverage.
That's the mission then. We want to give you a shortcut to getting your head around this something from nothing strategy. And we have to be really clear about the two paths here.
Right. There's the standard path for the, let's say, financially rich. And then there's this narrow, often misunderstood path for everyone else.
So let's start with the giants, the something from something strategy.
This is the standard playbook, right? If you're richly endowed, you don't fight fair. You just maximize your resource supremacy. Abbott calls it the playing chicken, don't mess with me approach.
And you see this everywhere. Think of massive telecom companies or, those huge global banks.
Yeah, they use their market share, their deep liquidity, their tech, their know-how. They just overpower smaller competitors.
Their whole strategy is basically to make competing with them look like a suicide mission.
And Roger Martin, he really laid out the rule for these big guys. He says, look, if you have a massive resource advantage, your job, your strategic imperative, is to invest in advantages that are expensive.
So expensive that nobody else can possibly match them.
Exactly. And the classic case study, the one that illustrates this better than anything, is the battle between Nike and Reebok back in the 80s.
Right. Reebok was really starting to challenge them, weren't they?
They were gaining significant ground. And Nike's response wasn't just to, make a slightly better shoe. They actually innovated in the cost structure itself.
They invented and then just aggressively invested in a whole new scale-sensitive cost category.
You got it. Athlete endorsements.
Michael Jordan.
Started with Michael Jordan and the Air Jordan line. Then they cemented it by sponsoring the '92 Olympic Dream Team. Now, this is a really crucial part, the nugget we have to pull out.
Go on.
It wasn't just the massive spending that killed Reebok. It was the scale sensitivity of that spending.
Okay, hold on. Unpack that for us.
Yeah.
What does scale sensitive mean in this context?
It means the cost is super high up front, but the cost per unit drops like a rock as your scale goes up. So Nike paid these exorbitant amounts for the best athletes.
Right.
But because they already dominated manufacturing and distribution, that massive cost was spread efficiently across millions and millions of shoes.
So Reebok could sign a few stars, but they didn't have the scale to make those huge contracts profitable.
That's it, exactly. Nike was betting that their scale would make those very expensive contracts cheaper per shoe for them than for Reebok, who's paying the same price for talent, but selling way fewer shoes.
So they just ramped up the spending to a level that was completely unprofitable for their competitor.
And Reebok couldn't keep up. They flatlined. They said no mass, as the sources put it. Nike's dominance was secured not by some new rubber sole, but by leveraging their money to create a competitive category no one else could afford to enter.
It's a compelling story, but wow, is it discouraging for the rest of us. And that brings us to what you could call a learner's dilemma.
Yeah.
Most of us, if you're a mid-sized company, an NGO, a development partner, you're working with limited, often shrinking budgets. We can't outspend anyone.
If you try to fight Nike's battle, you will lose, period.
So we have to recognize that most organizations need a completely different rule book. We've got to pivot.
Which brings us to part 2, defining the something from nothing advantage.
Okay, the phrase something from zero just feels contradictory, like magical thinking.
It does, I get that. But the core mindset shift is realizing that zero is, it's a fiction. It means you stop obsessing over what your competitor is spending, and you start looking for that cool spring in the desert.
The leverage point that everyone else just walked right past.
Exactly. If you're at a resource disadvantage, Roger Martin's advice is simple. Your main task is to gain an advantage on the cheap.
So this is where things like creativity, intelligence, just pure observation, they start to replace cash.
Right. Your strategic thinking has to narrow down to 2 critical questions. First, With all the billions being spent by the Goliaths, what are customers still missing?
And that takes real deep empathy.
It does, and you have to remember, a lot of modern markets are two-sided.
That's a huge point. How does that two-sided market idea apply if you're, say, a small NGO with no resources?
Well, think about it. You have two customer sets, right? The beneficiaries you serve and the funders who give you the resources. If you're starting with nothing, you can't pay both sides to show up.
The classic chicken or egg problem.
Precisely. The cheap advantage often comes from solving that. Maybe you focus all your initial, very limited energy on building genuine, deep trust with the beneficiaries. That trust is an inexpensive asset.
And the funders then follow that demonstrated localized impact, something the big guys can't just replicate by writing a check.
Exactly. They might try to buy market share, but you can't buy genuine trust overnight.
Okay, so that's question one. Find the unmet need. What's question two?
Question 2 is finding inexpensive ways to be genuinely unique in meeting that need. And the strategy here is built on noticing things, not buying them.
And the sources point to two specific pathways for this. The first one is about just inventorying the assets you already have, the ones hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, the things under your nose that you're not using strategically. It could be a unique data set or institutional knowledge that only your long-term staff have.
Or even something like a really inconvenient location that's actually perfect for a niche customer.
Exactly. Or just the accumulated goodwill of your small team. You have to stop seeing these things as just, overhead or history and start seeing them as potential leverage.
Okay, so that's pathway one. And pathway two is creating cheap but valuable abilities. This is where effort completely replaces capital.
Yeah, this is about choosing to compete on things like response time or being way more conscientious and detailed than the status quo, or maybe most importantly,
Being genuinely more creative.
yes, refusing to follow the stale thinking that plagues so many big organizations. When you're small, you can be more tech savvy, you can respond to an email right away. These are things that are incredibly hard for bureaucratic giants to mimic.
They're cheap for you to do, but expensive for the giant to integrate.
But there's a big warning here, isn't there? I mean, every company on Earth claims to be innovative and customer-focused.
Yes, the warning is essential. You have to focus on a genuine attribute, a real actionable insight. Don't just compete on hype or try to look like a polished, expensive competitor.
That space is already oversubscribed, as they say. If you just copy the trendy website and the jargon, you've already lost. You look just like the giants you can't afford to be.
Your uniqueness has to be real, tangible.
That's the key distinction, substance over presentation. Okay, let's pivot now to part 3 and talk about two competitive edges that they don't even show up on a balance sheet: emotion and time.
Right. We have to acknowledge the deep psychology here. People buy feelings. They buy emotions. They buy based on how they want to feel about themselves.
And that's true for everything from a luxury car to B2B software.
If you look at an Apple iPhone versus a cheaper Android clone, the specs might be pretty comparable. But people will swear the iPhone is indispensable.
And the sources suggest the real motivator isn't the camera, it's the feeling of belonging or quality or status that the device gives them.
It's a powerful point. It means the logical, feature-based argument is often just a rationalization for an emotional decision.
And the research backs this up. Nielsen Company found that something like 90% of purchasing decisions are made almost subconsciously.
90%, wow.
So if a resource-poor company can figure out how to tap into that emotional desire, how to make a customer feel seen or valued or aspirational, they've deployed a massive advantage that costs nothing extra.
It just costs deep attention.
Big budgets don't necessarily buy big feelings.
That's right. So, okay, pair that emotional connection with the second advantage.
Yeah.
Time. George Stock famously called time the secret weapon.
He did. And we've really moved past the old paradigm of what competitive advantage even is.
Which used to be just, maximizing value for the lowest cost.
Precisely. Stock argued the new paradigm is getting the most value for the lowest cost in the least amount of time. Speed isn't just a feature anymore. It's a fundamental source of leverage.
Okay, but how does speed provide leverage? How does being faster actually multiply your other advantages?
Think about process cycle time. If you can slash the time it takes to process an order or develop a solution or just respond to a problem, you dramatically reduce the chances for error and miscommunication.
So less rework.
Right. A competitor that's 50% faster across their organization is basically operating at a massive discount compared to the slow guy. They make fewer mistakes, they adapt to market shifts quicker.
And they capture opportunities before the slow mover even notices them.
That is a profound insight for anyone trying to compete with zero resources.
Yeah.
Focusing on speed and responsiveness requires coordination and mindset, not capital. And it multiplies the effectiveness of every single dollar you do spend.
Speed is the ultimate inexpensive lever.
It is. It just requires the focus to eliminate bottlenecks.
Which brings us perfectly to our final and maybe the most potent, inexpensive resource of all. Mindset and the ability to manage change.
Because right now, the environment feels, volatile is an understatement.
Change isn't just happening. It feels like it's happening everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
You've got these simultaneous shifts, geopolitical, technological,
For sure.
societal demands, financial volatility, and the combined effect is often just confusion and exhaustion inside organizations.
It's easy to feel worn out. But the critical lesson here is that this volatility is actually an advantage for the agile, resource-poor entity.
Absolutely. The ability to manage this accelerating pace of change, to see new realities as they emerge, and to quickly integrate them, that is an almost no-cost competitive resource.
If you can move while your bigger competitors are still stuck in committee meetings analyzing the change, you win.
We should also reflect on what this disruption really is. It's not just doom and chaos.
No. The sources remind us that the winners of the 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics got it for their work on the theory of sustained growth through creative destruction.
And that theory is so crucial here. It basically says that for real growth and prosperity to happen, old, inefficient ways of doing things have to be destroyed to make way for the new.
It's painful, but it's necessary. And it means that reinvention isn't optional, it's essential.
So if reinvention is essential, what does that mean for a leader? It has to be more than just adapting processes, right?
It requires challenging the very identity of your company. McKinsey partners point this out. Leaders have to rethink how they create value and who they are at their core.
So a development partner might realize their identity needs to shift from, say, being a funding source to being a knowledge facilitator.
Exactly. That identity shift costs $0, but it completely reframes their strategic advantage and their relevance in the world today.
That is the ultimate something from nothing move. It's not just tweaking the operation. It's asking, are we still solving the right problem for the right people?
And are we defined by our current, maybe restrictive identity? That kind of fundamental self-examination is free.
And it creates the ultimate path to finding those overlooked advantages. If you want to see what others miss, you have to stop looking where everyone else is looking.
Stop looking at the same metrics, the same competitors. Look internally at your cheap resources and externally at the customer's unmet emotional needs.